Facebook. And are we hello YouTube?
And your event is starting on YouTube, so yep.
Okay.
Perfect. Close enough.
We're here. We're live.
And jingle. No. Hello, welcome to Live at Epiphan. As usual, it's Thursday, 3 o'clock. Dan and I are here to talk about something cool. And so, yeah, we got a pretty good topic. But of course, follow along in chat, throw in your questions. I'm monitoring that. And this one might have some pretty good questions. So I'm anticipating you guys be really active.
We do have a lot to cover today. We're talking about camera supports. So there's about a million different options out there when it comes to moving your camera, sliding your camera, stabilizing your camera.
Yeah.
And we're just going to quite literally run down sort of the 101, if you will, of every type of camera support.
Types, but also a little bit of why you might want some of these things or look at adding some of these things.
Yeah.
So Scott was in there 15 minutes early throwing in some great comments. So appreciate
Scott got
Scott.
a slider. You'll have to let us know what you got there.
Yeah,
Scott.
post it in the
We'll
webcaster
check
group,
it out.
Scott. Let's see which one you got. We got to compare the tools. So
Now, I know before we get in the topic today, there's a couple news items you wanted to cover.
yes,
So.
the news. So probably the first big one, and I think you could probably pull this up. So temporary producer George II can bring us to picture-in-picture here. This was actually kind of big news because, as you guys know, we talk about both of these companies a fair bit. Logitech is acquiring Blue microphones in cash for $117 million some dollars. I don't know what to think of this yet. I have some opinions on previous Logitech acquisitions, so I'm hoping this goes more positive because I kind of like Blue and I don't want to see them disappear into obscurity. So I don't know. This might be good. It might be bad. We'll have to see. But it certainly might be able to bring Blue to a wider customer base. So that's one possibility.
I think more and more people just need quality microphones on their desk, and partnering with the biggest
peripheral
maker
manufacturer,
in the world, that might help. That might be good.
It also seems to be a little bit of an indicator that there are some bigger peripheral companies out there that are buying up some smaller guys. Just a month or so ago, Corsair bought Elgato, stuff like that.
Yep.
So there's a few things that are happening in that world. So that was an interesting one. There was another interesting one that I spotted that I've noticed that doesn't apply to everybody yet. So I actually don't have a good example to show you. But Twitch is reworking their UI a little bit.
Okay.
They've gone to a lighter look, less black, less purple.
Less underground.
Yeah.
They're trying to reach the mainstream now.
Yeah, so more white background. They've moved around some positioning of things to make certain channel stats a little easier to find when you're as a viewer. Also, recommended streams are a little easier to find. And I think this is going to be, again...
Well, it's good that they're starting that because, just personal, anecdotal, I find Twitch one of the more cluttered and difficult interfaces to find things.
It's very easy to find the channels that you follow or subscribe to, but discovery of new content's very difficult.
Yeah.
And so I think this tweaking and massaging of their UI is them pushing forward on that. And fingers crossed, maybe someday they'll have a proper UI for VOD content. Maybe.
Well, good to see they're evolving. Next up, Facebook shuts off access to user data for hundreds of thousands of apps.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about how there's some big changes rolling out with Facebook's security and permissions. Maybe you can kind of let us know how that has affected Epiphan and everyone else.
Yeah, so this actually, although the title doesn't seem to really suggest it, but directly impacts Webcaster. Webcaster to Facebook is essentially an app. And this is exactly what this is talking about. As a fallout and sort of coming out of this Cambridge Analytica scandal, disaster, whatever you want to call it, Facebook was sort of pushed into making significant changes to how sharing permissions work on the back end of their systems. One of the things they found was that there are a ton of apps that were using their API that aren't exactly good. And some of them relate to some of these scandals.
Not everyone is as noble and true as Epiphan.
Right, exactly.
Right? Helping people make the world a better place with webcasters. Some people were taking advantage of these permissions, right?
Exactly. And so this change is twofold. One, going forward, permissions are a little stricter, a little easier to control, but it also meant that anybody unwilling or unable to reapply and resubmit their apps for approval on Facebook, which of course we did, their app is now blocked. So it's thousands and thousands of apps that are now
just disabled, probably.
dead and disabled because of this change.
It's probably good to clean up some of that clutter, though. So.
Absolutely. And of course, if it's an illegitimate app, then they weren't going to resubmit it. So now they're gone. So that's a good thing, but it does play into this whole bigger thing. We, of course, have customers with Webcaster X2s. Still a lot of people using Webcaster X1. This affects those devices as well. So if you haven't done your firmware updates yet, do them. If you're a Webcaster X1 customer, there's a thread in the forums we're going to update as we discover more about its behavior, because it'll be a little different. We're going to have to see. We're not 100% sure how all of this is going to affect that. So there's a thread in our forums. If you're a Webcaster X1 user actively, go ahead and check that out, and we'll keep updating it with discovery.
Awesome. Next up, I just thought this was kind of interesting. This was on CBC last week. In Canada, Uber and Lyft drivers can't live stream riders without explicit consent. So I guess one of the growing trends in the live stream world was to live stream inside your Uber.
Yeah.
Which, I think that could be kind of neat, right? But you should probably tell people you're doing it.
Yeah, so I think this partially came out of, there was a couple of guys in the US that were doing it as Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. They had some complaints because some customers got upset that they weren't told that the live stream was going. So there's a number of different things there, but it's interesting that in this case it's gone even into the court level here in Canada to say what's allowed and what's not allowed. And this is an interesting one because there's two sides to this. I see it. There's the side of I'm live streaming for my own security, right? Like there's a reason why taxis have cameras, right? There's a security element to it, and maybe that's where this trend started. But then there's also, if you're profiting off of someone else, they either need to know and volunteer for it, or you need to pay them, right? Like that's how things work. So if you're live streaming on Twitch or YouTube and you're monetizing that content and you're making money off of your riders, and that's basically what this...
Well, I think those drivers have been removed, and obviously this is something that we're going to continue to see, right?
Well, some of the guys in the U.S. have been allowed. They've been explicitly allowed to do this and told it's okay by those companies, Lyft and Uber, as well as by the platforms, Twitch, because some guys got banned and then reinstated. So I think in the U.S. it varies from state to state because sometimes they have third-party consent laws, sometimes they don't. Here in Canada, that's more of a federal thing, so it's a one rule across the country. It's not a states' rights thing.
Okay. Well, interesting. I guess this is going to be a topic that probably comes up again and again.
Yeah.
What about a polo shirt giveaway?
It's a good question, Stefan. It's a good question.
Well, actually...
Not this one.
George, we were just commenting, George is wearing the retro Epiphan Systems shirt from, what is that, circa... early 2000s or something, probably, right?
This is probably 2012.
Okay.
2011, 2012, this shirt. And I get yelled at by other George, playing producer today, that I'm not allowed to wear these retro shirts on camera.
We don't monetize this content, but we should start a merch store.
We should.
What would we have? We'd have like polo shirts and, I don't know, pens, HDMI cables.
Trucker caps. I think about all the giveaways we've given away at trade shows. We've had fidget spinners.
Yeah, fidget spinners are always a big hit.
We've had the flashy armbands with the lights in them for joggers and runners.
Yeah. Oh, that's actually, we were looking at what we're going to give away at trade shows next time. And George has a bunch of like pretty nifty sunglasses. So there's different colors, and different textures of wood and whatnot. So
my favorite overall is still the space pens. So anybody who came to trade shows years ago, lucky enough to get an Epiphan space pen.
Okay.
Those things ain't cheap. And they're awesome. We don't do those anymore.
We're getting some Epiphan, Epiphan glasses. I'm even on brand color. This is nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There we go.
There
Perfect.
We go. Awesome.
I cannot see a damn thing now that I have my glasses on. All right, we'll just switch that back. So that's interesting. Sunglasses.
All right, so we've strayed completely off topic now.
We're having fun today. It's okay.
Yeah, we're just hanging out. So
topic.
Yeah, why don't we get into the topic? So today we're talking about camera supports. So there's like a gajillion options for camera supports, and there's lots of different reasons why you choose one over another. So we're just going to start sort of rapid fire through some things. The first thing I wanted to show here, though, and this is something that in most camera support scenarios you're going to need to know. So right here, this is a Manfrotto plate. And this is pretty much what you're going to see in terms of camera mounting screws.
Right.
So on the left, you see this screw. This is your 1/4-20. This is pretty much standard across the world as far as camera screws, camera mounts. On the right here is 5/8. I forget what it's called. So that's the larger size. You're going to see that on professional cameras.
Yeah.
And then some cameras have the nub as well. So if in doubt, the 1/4-20, the smaller screw, is going to work with pretty much every camera.
Double-ended piece that goes into a clamp.
Yeah, we do have a spigot here that has both. So just be aware, obviously, whatever you're doing, make sure that you have the right mounting.
Right. Like you say, lack of a better word, domestic cameras tend to use the 1/4-inch.
Yeah.
And then
what is the bigger one called? I think it's the 5/16.
Yeah,
5/16.
It's 5/16. It's a definitely. I mean, it's noticeable. It's a big chunk different. So, that's pretty noticeable. This in particular. So that's the plate. That's going to go into.
Well, that's a Manfrotto plate. I mean, you've got other types of. These are all your different various mounting plates. Most of them come with both screws, and then you can remove the one if you don't need. I like to use both if the camera has both, because when you have 2 points of contact, your mounting plate doesn't want to rotate.
Right. Well, that's the idea with the nub too, right?
Exactly.
It's not a secure point, but it's a stops rotation point.
And here you see you can even get a little adapter, which will turn your 1/4-20 into the 5/16, so that you can swap it easily if you need to.
So those plates are going to go on your tripods and things like that. Tripods are cool. Yeah. They're obviously pretty universal.
Yeah, let's is that the first thing we're going to talk about? Okay, let's start with tripods. So tripods, we're obviously using a tripod right now with the camera you're seeing us on. We're using
C100 back there on another tripod.
A Manfrotto. Tripods, I think the biggest question that you need to ask yourself is how big do you need for the camera and rig you're
How much
using?
weight are you putting on it?
Right, so here we've got like a Miller tripod. This has, obviously it has the leg
beefy.
supports in the center. This is like a 100mm ball head, and so that'll hold a pretty heavy camera with some rigging as well.
Right.
If you wanted to use a slider or something on your tripod, you're going to want a ball head that's at least 70mm, probably 100mm would be even better.
Yeah. So it's funny, we mentioned we have that C100 on the tripod behind us. That tripod's probably too small for the C100 realistically.
Yeah, like this one that we've got behind us here, that's really a photo tripod.
Yeah,
but
it's a DSLR kind of thing.
Good enough for displaying a camera on set, but that's not really ideal for a camera.
But if we were trying to handle that, it'd be wobbly and unstable. So.
Now these are cool. This is like a tripod that can get really low. There's no spreaders. This is a telescoping, and it looks like carbon fiber legs. I think one of the big decisions to make when you buy a tripod is, weight.
Material
and weight and
how if you need it to be portable,
sturdy it is.
If you need it to be portable, weight's everything. So carbon fiber is going to cost a lot more, but if it saves you 10 pounds, then, that's a lot.
Something like this is a Satchler. I think this is a 70mm head. This is a very sturdy tripod. I've used this one. It does have the leg spreaders right at the bottom, which is kind of nice. You can get these legs super wide, which helps you get a strong base.
Right.
Thing is, with something like this, like even though these look like carbon fiber legs, it's pretty heavy. So when you're out there moving around,
it's different density of carbon fiber. So
it's the head that usually is most of the weight. So when you get the larger ball heads, those things weigh quite a bit. There's again the Manfrotto, and actually we have that right here on our monopod. So why don't we show our monopod?
Grab this here. Well, we'll start with the head. And again, this monopod, that head's probably most of the weight.
Yeah, it's a very, very sturdy head. Thing that's nice with a monopod like this, so we've got it clicked in here. I'll move the mini so that we can see a little better.
So this one we use when we travel quite a bit, partly because not with too heavy of a camera, but with these legs, you can drop it down. It gives you a more stable base as a monopod, but you can even let it freestand to a degree with not too much weight on the top.
Yeah, you can fold the legs up too if you don't want that, but
it's good for transit.
Now the cool thing here is this bottom thing. You can kind of like
it has a little
disengage it, which allows you to do these kind of things. So you can do really nice moves actually, pushing in and pulling out.
So that combined with the head, you can do some lean in and out. There's some pretty cool movements.
Now you can't do tilts. Or you can't do you can't do tilts really because your camera will turn sideways when you do it. But for pushing in and that kind of thing, it looks really nice.
Yeah, then you can just lock it back down again, and it locks.
Yeah, now obviously don't rely on that to not tip over with your camera on top, but if you just need a little extra support, there you go.
And monopods are great for, and I guess in general, why would you use a tripod, monopod, some sort of stable structure? It's all about stress relief, right?
Yeah.
You can't manhandle a camera all the time.
No,
that's just, I don't care how big you are. That's
no, I mean human fatigue is real when you're shooting all day. So now making the choice between a monopod and a tripod, obviously a tripod takes up more space. It's harder to move around.
Yeah.
Monopod's much better for run and gun, but with a tripod, you do have more
room.
room.
Not totally freestanding.
Yeah, you do have more room on the tripod as well to like mount other stuff. So like here's an example of a webcaster setup with a tripod, and you see here
batteries and everything are strapped
we've got on the arm, we've got the anchor battery, we've got a webcaster with some elastic bands. These elastic bands can actually come in really handy for mounting stuff. So you've just got more points of contact to like, rig some stuff up. Right. So that's where a tripod is.
And that was a shot you did from the museum.
Yeah, that was my attempt at live streaming some fireworks on Canada Day. Unfortunately, 5 minutes before the fireworks, everybody, tens of thousands of people also tried to do their live stream, so the network basically
that always happens in Canada Day downtown. Cell networks go down completely.
We tried. We got some nice footage, but no stream, unfortunately. But let's keep things moving here.
Yeah, Michael was just saying in here that there's a few companies that have new chicken foot monopods.
Okay, cool. So, we should look that up, chicken foot monopods. Let's check this out, though. If you want to go like super cheap, you have very little budget.
Yeah.
You don't want to invest in a tripod, which can be expensive.
Yeah.
Sandbags, actually a good option. So here's some examples of just, some bean bags and sandbags, and you can use this to support your camera, especially in a mobile scenario. So here you see, someone even using it on a fence. Like these type of sandbags are actually popular for wildlife photographers because they'll put them over the window on their car so that you can kind of be in the seat.
It's just a small cradle, cushions the camera.
Yeah.
Quick and easy to set up.
You can get it right on the ground, like super low.
Chuck it down and do it.
And there you go. And a sandbag is going to be useful for other things when you're doing production
throwing
stuff
on your
well.
light stands in your studio so you don't kick them over, like we talked about a couple episodes ago.
Exactly. Good to have that, like a weighted base of some kind. So sandbags, a great option. Next up, let's talk about, why don't we look at just tabletop options? So we've got things like, these little mini tripods that you can put right onto a table. So you don't need the legs. You just, use the, mount it to a light pole, mount it to a desk, put it on top of a table.
The GorillaPod style, it can be very flexible, very useful. I find for doing a very traditional tripod style setup, they're a bit annoying because they're too flexible. But for weird unlevel surfaces or wrapping around stuff, they work pretty well. But the little ones like that, let's say you have GoPro mounts like this in my hand, you slap that on there and use your GoPro or whatever. They're perfectly sized for a camera that small and light.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised how often you have like a table available when you need to get that shot. So you can just use what's available around you and you're spending a fraction of the price.
Exactly.
Next up, wanted to talk about clamps.
Like I have
clamps.
One here.
So George is holding a clamp.
Yeah,
what do you got there?
This is actually a Manfrotto clamp.
It's got a serious amount of spring torque in it.
This one's basically designed as a universal clamp. This is actually where this guy's from. You can drop it in there and flip it around, mount it. This can work for lights. This can work for your camera with those. You can put that piece in here if you want to.
It goes into a light stand. You could clip it onto a wall, put it on a pole, clip it to a stand.
Whatever, door, window, doesn't matter. You can just clip it, and that's pretty much it.
Now, obviously, you're limited probably by how much weight you can put on that, but for something like a mirrorless or even a smaller DSLR,
this one
why
holds
not?
A fair bit because the spring is pretty strong. Of course, again, you're still relying on these rubber feet to grip, but these are pretty good. Not my favorite, but not bad.
And I've got some examples here of just other setups where people are using different clamps, different
the arm
arms.
style ones can be really cool.
We've seen. Here's another clamp with just like a bendy arm
clamp, GorillaPod hybrid.
On a pole. So, you can get pretty creative. Clamps are not expensive, but they do allow you to do some pretty neat things like this, where, you You set up some stands and shoot straight down. Or,
the overhead shots.
Get your camera into positions that a tripod just can't do.
Especially the overhead shots. That's probably a big way to really get those overhead shots.
Yep.
That's a great example of it. There's other ways you can do that as well.
Yeah.
Get a ball head on there.
Now we've got some examples here. If we're talking about overhead shots, we might as well show some examples of that. Here's some rigs, using.
That's fancy.
Like these are using rods and mounting systems. So these are C-stands that are supporting the entire structure, but then some rods and clamps to set the camera. So this is actually a slider that they've created, a sliding system for shooting straight down.
Right.
You see, it looks like they're shooting some kind of like suitcase thing on the bed. So, just a good example of, some more advanced rigging setups. And if you want to do that kind of thing, there's a lot of companies that sell these. Here's like another just crazy rig. This looks like a car setup.
I don't even understand what's happening in this picture.
But it just shows how deep the rabbit hole goes with this kind of thing. We're getting a comment as well here from Michael.
Yeah.
He's talking about clamps on ladders and light poles. Great example.
Exactly, absolutely.
If you need something to just get elevated, there you go. Use a clamp, put it on a pole. You've probably got a light stand somewhere.
So you mentioned in that, you mentioned the concept of sliders, and that came up earlier in pre-chat with Scott. I guess that's another thing we can look at is what is a slider and why would we want to use that?
Yeah, so what is this? This is our slider, right?
That's our slider. And so I think part of today's discussion, we wanted to talk about why we might want to use some of these more advanced tools. The slider might be the first one. Tripods, monopods, those are obvious. You need to put your camera on something. Yeah. But why would I introduce a slider, either tripod mounted or otherwise? Why would I introduce this beside it being super cool and slidey?
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to use, but aside from that, I think the cool thing that a slider does is it gives you the perspective, the depth perspective effect. When you have your camera moving, it creates a parallax effect between foreground, background, and midground objects or people.
Exactly. So it's something you could do side to side if you want to get a panning shot. It's something you could do, for that depth.
Forward and back as well.
So they're pretty cool for that type of setup. Now this is a fairly basic one. This one's not too fancy.
Yeah, but it's smooth though. That's the key.
This one.
That's what you want to look for when you're getting your slider. Is how smooth are the wheels and what is the wheel type? Sometimes it's like I've even seen sliders where it's almost like just a felt pad on a rail. Obviously, you're not going to get as smooth a movement. You're not going to keep the inertia. Is actually what you want on a slider. There's that little bit of inertia.
Good with that. It's it's
now,
pretty good.
You can take this slider, and obviously we're using it here on the table, so there's adjustable feet but there is a cheese plate on the bottom, so you can mount this onto your tripod. You obviously want to have a sturdy enough tripod, like we were mentioning earlier.
Mounts here that we could put it on 2 C-stands.
Yeah, you want to get it onto a light stand to provide some added support, because what happens is when you throw this on a tripod, when you get your 6-pound DSLR with a monitor over on this end, the whole thing starts to kind of move.
So
and
you want to have...
So you need that extra support. I've got some examples here. This is a shoot that I did a couple years back, but you see here we've got, I think this was a 70 millimeter ball head, but we were shooting some product shots for a cell phone. So this is a push-in shot. And what you see is we actually have a C-stand on each side of the slider as well to provide extra support.
So you actually have 3 points of support.
Yeah, so there's a C-stand here, there's a tripod with a big plate, another C-stand, and then actually you see we've got the rubber band here. The thing with a slider that's a manual slider is it's a
pretty hard stop.
It's hard to feather the end of your move. So a rubber band can help with that. So you can use a rubber band as like a stopping point that you can kind of like crash into.
Cushion. Yeah, it's just a cushion.
Cushion here. It'll be good. But you can also use a rubber band to actually do your move. So you can attach the rubber band onto your head and then pull and push using the rubber band. It's going to sort of give you that.
The human hand is not so good at those kind of things.
It's hard to do. It requires some skill. Now the trick is what you can do is actually get a motorized slider. So I don't know if I have an example. Here's an example of like a motorized slider. So you set it up, you tell the motor what to do, and it's going to do a precise move for you.
Right.
Even, going as far as to pan and rotate your camera as well.
Yeah, exactly. Stefan was just saying, I saw a really cool video on a robot which could be programmed to move the camera around, make amazing shots, pan, slide, turn around, everything like that.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
I think he was mentioning Edelkrone as well. They're great.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, there's that's when you start getting really fancy.
Yeah. Well, why don't we take a look at some of the Edelkrone stuff, because I had it here ready to go. So this is the, which one is this called again? The Wing. So here's an option that is great for those tripod slides that you want to do.
That's mesmerizing.
Without requiring
just kind
a
of stare
tripod.
at that all day.
I know. This is a cool website, by the way, if you just want to check out some neat stuff. Now, Edelkrone stuff isn't cheap, but it's very well respected and sturdy and professional grade stuff, right?
But when we're looking at this and we're considering spending potentially large amounts of money on this stuff, again, we come back to the question of why we would want to do this, right? So I think the general idea is when we start getting into these fancier support systems, we're really talking about adding a new level of depth or creativity to our production. Sometimes that's in a live stream, sometimes that's in a studio recording, any of those things. A static camera, I mean, we typically use just static cameras in here. It's kind of boring sometimes. Sometimes you want to add a little more into it. And if you need to minimize, the number of people, then you need some sort of mechanical support. And I think you can go farther than that if you're getting outside this. These are kind of things that are great in studio, sliders, mechanical devices. But then there's also an element of, let's say we're live streaming and we're doing it outside of a studio environment. I think that's where things
What do you do there?
Things get interesting.
Yeah, it's easy when you're in the studio and you've got a controlled environment and a nice flat floor that you can
you got all the time in the world to
on.
figure out where to put those elastics to fine tune and tweak everything.
But when you get out on the go, you might need some different things. So, here's an example. It's just some basic chest mounts. Here's a way to, give yourself a couple extra points of contact when you're taking your camera mobile. So, even as simple as just a little chest piece. And these are relatively inexpensive. Even with a larger camera, this gets the weight off of your shoulder. It gives you, more endurance.
And that one's a shoulder, the old school style.
Yeah, this is the Cowboy Studio. This thing's like $25 or $20 or something, right?
Yeah.
And it's cheap, but it kind of works. So if you
probably
want,
not the most comfortable.
I saw this one. I just thought this was hilarious. No one's ever going to do this. This looks so impractical, but I just thought I'd share it because it was so ridiculous.
I think the idea is to try to self-produce
I don't know.
even walk, but oh boy,
this was on Alibaba, so I just
well, there we go. Yeah, that's
don't do this, anybody.
Yeah,
please don't do this. But here's another example of just
and then the other way we can look at it. I'm going to bring this up while you bring it up as well.
Handheld stabilizer.
Handheld stabilizer. This is yours.
Yeah, this is my Flycam. I actually got this from. It's now called Pro Aim. Used to be called Cinecity, but it's like an Indian website that sells sort of cheap production gear. And this is the Flycam, and this is just a basic DSLR handheld stabilizer. So camera goes on top, you weight it, you balance it, and then what happens is you get nice, relatively smooth camera moves.
Right.
Now the thing with something like this is there's no electronic gimbals, there's no servos in this.
No, I mean it's still a great thing to stabilize, but you probably still need maybe a little extra second hand in there, something like that.
You do this. Most people think this is for a one-handed operation. It's actually a two-handed operation. You use
this is carbon fiber, but even just these have next to no weight in them right now. But if this had a 6-pound camera on here, I'd get tired pretty quick doing this.
And that's why this actually, I didn't bring it, but this comes with like an arm piece that you Velcros around, and it puts a metal spigot that goes up into the handle, so it gives you a little extra support. Here's just an example of you guys have probably seen these before, but this is like someone's balancing it. It takes a little while to get your balance correct, so you got to plan for every time you go to use it, take 10 minutes to balance it. But once you do get it balanced, the result is actually pretty good. Now, the thing to remember is, if anything about the weight of your camera changes, the balance is going to go off. So even if you zoom your telephoto lens slightly, that's going to change the weight characteristics and the balance of your camera. If you swap batteries and put in a different brand of battery, might be heavier or lighter. So these are all things to consider when you're using these. But this is really very similar to even like what a Steadicam is, an old school Steadicam. Why don't we show just a little bit of that? I think I have some Steadicam examples. So Steadicam, so you know it's a weighted
this is a
counterbalance like this, and here it is being used with vests, right? So no different really than this, just larger scale, and of course you have the arms with the vest with the articulating arms, which help to absorb some of the shock. Now, usually with something like this, you need to be kind of skilled as the operator. It's not something that you just pick up and anybody can do. It does require, you know, some experience, and you have to have some talent and some capability to, you know, be able to walk around while watching a monitor without tripping over yourself.
Well, exactly.
It's, you know, there's some skill involved, and there's, you know, what it looks like with just the vest. And this, of course, distributes the weight across your upper body and your torso so that you can stay fresh for much longer.
Exactly, yeah. And I think the other important thing looking at this as well is, like, although this has some cool different stabilizer things, it's not a gimbal, because you can still even hit the head with this handle, screwing that up. And so gimbal's a whole other ballgame in a way.
Yeah, do we want to go into gimbals? Sure, we could. Why don't we show one thing first?
Yeah,
Let's show a couple like cheaper options first.
Okay.
So
Yeah, we'll look at
I just wanted to show, these are just grips and cages.
Right.
So take your camera, give yourself some grip. Get a grip.
Get a grip. Yeah.
Get a grip, everybody.
Those ones are cool. Those ones are the next one you have, I think. These style ones are super simple because holding it down, maybe rotating that monitor up towards you instead of trying to hold something at shoulder height, it's more comfortable.
Oh yeah.
It's not going to work
sure.
with everything, but they are, you know, and you can kind of just have a loose grip, let it dangle, let it balance itself almost.
Yeah.
You know, so those can be handy and very inexpensive.
Absolutely. Like these are under $100. Now you can take it to the next level and go with something like a wooden camera and a cage. This gives you like a zillion mounting points. You can add rails if you want to do follow focus. There's an A7S rig, so there's all kinds of options for these. Even just adding a top handle to your camera can make a big difference. You know, it gives you an extra point of contact if you want to do low shots. Here's kind of like, I call it the steering wheel, but this again is just a way to get the center of gravity of your camera more centralized. It's going to give you a smoother experience.
So that wheel, that's more like a two-sided grip, right?
Yeah, so you hold it like this, but the result is that, you know, when you're holding a camera with one hand in the center, the center of it's all about weight and balance, right? So just getting that weight and balance more distributed is going to make a difference. And then, you know, the next step up from, you know, maybe some handheld stuff is to go with like a shoulder mount, right?
Right.
So you see here, this is just a basic shoulder kit. You've got a pad on your shoulder. It's gonna, you know, give you more points of contact at the camera. You could put your battery behind your shoulder like this guy's doing. That's going to, you know, distribute the weight to the back a little bit better.
You used one of these during that fashion show shoot a few months back.
Yeah, I think I have a photo of that set up as well. There
you are. So I mean, that helped because you were wandering around that whole venue, and we did a show on that, and we have some video of that as well. So if you guys are interested in that, check that out. But that obviously made it a lot easier for you to.
Oh, it wouldn't have been possible. Like, this camera gets pretty heavy once you're using the big Anton Bauer batteries, and we've got a transmitter on there.
Yeah, the light, the monitor.
It starts to get pretty heavy, right?
Yeah.
So something like this, I think this was a Shape shoulder rig. You can adjust to your specific body type. I can move these handles, put them wherever I want. So that certainly helps. Shoulder mount is not good. There's a reason why it's so popular. It's because it's very versatile.
This actually brings up, this comment right here from Michael brings up a great thing, a clip actually that you had earlier up. It's worked 2 live remotes where operators gracefully fell over wearing Steadicams. That reminded us of this clip of, you know, the what not to do.
Yeah, I wanted to share this. So this is becoming more popular with the gimbals, using, I guess, the Segway or the hoverboard, as it were.
Yeah.
But this is, I think this was at some kind of track meet, Usain Bolt, and a little mishap with the camera operator. It's hard to look cool when you almost break Usain Bolt's leg.
Yeah. And the funniest part about that is that track down the side there, that's for the camera it's a camera static track that's there to film the race.
Oh, man.
And this guy's just cruising around.
The camera actually lands on his head,
hoverboard, and like, you know.
Now, fortunately, Usain was okay, and actually the cameraman apologized and gave him a gift the next track meet, which it seems like they're friends now. But it just goes to show, you know, sometimes you can kind of take it too far with the technology and end up almost hurting someone.
But we were commenting earlier that idea of using the hoverboard, or even the really low rent version, just using a skateboard and pushing somebody around, that's become pretty common, pretty popular, where people are doing that as just a way, because not everyone can afford the Hollywood style train track, full rig, you know, kind of thing. But those also have limitations. Yeah. Whereas if the hoverboard, especially a big, beefy off-road one like that, you can go over lots of different terrain. You can go, you know, outside of the confines of that.
Here's a cool example here. Here's a guy using a Ronin 2 gimbal and the hoverboard, and this is someone who's got some talent.
Yeah, that. I mean, he's managing to steer the hoverboard in a circle there while maintaining his camera setup. I mean,
so I guess we're kind of talking about gimbals a little bit here. We'll talk about this guy here. Now, the important thing to note is this guy is not operating the camera, okay? He's just holding the camera. In a scenario like this, the camera is being operated remotely. So there's servos attached for focus and for, you know, being able to control the gimbal itself to direct where the lens is pointed. So in this kind of a scenario, this guy doesn't need to worry about is the shot in focus. He's just trying to make sure the camera's in the right spot. And he's doing a pretty slick job of it as well.
I mean, if you're trying to do it on a hoverboard, I think that's more than enough. So, you know, I mean, that still takes some talent for sure.
So let's jump back a little bit and start to talk about, you know, we talked about sliders and shoulder rigs and whatnot. Let's talk about gimbals. So at the low end of price point, you've got things like the mobile gimbals.
Your smartphone gimbals, yeah. And, you know, even these, I guess cost is, you know, relative to a degree. You know, these are starting to come down quite a bit. You can start to get these pretty inexpensive. And these can help a lot just for stabilizing, right? I mean, just being able to move and make a sweeping shot nice and stable. Trying to do that with your hand with a smartphone is a disaster. Like, it just never looks good. And coming back to our general theme of what we always try to do this, you know, every week on this show is talk about how we can bring quality to our video productions, especially live streaming. And shaky cam is one of the worst things that's going to drive your audience away.
It's a pretty telltale sign that, you know, of low production quality when the camera is not stable.
I mean, I tune out right away if I'm watching a live stream of somebody and it's a shaky cam. It's like, it just makes you nauseous. You just want to tune out, walk away. It doesn't matter how good the content is or how, you know, likable the personality of that person on camera is. If it's shaky cam, which is also bad for compression.
When we've talked about that as well.
You know, the more abrupt movements, the harder it is to compress. So, you know, you want to stabilize. Mm-hmm. That's a big foundation, I think. And if you're on the road doing it, gimbals can be probably the ultimate way to do it on the road.
Yeah, you could step up to like, this is, I think, the Ronin S. This is their sort of high-end DSLR gimbal. So this actually even communicates with the camera. I think if you have a Sony or a Canon camera, this will actually tap into your camera. It'll power your camera. You can also, it'll do like your autofocus with you. If you have the right lens and camera compatible, you know, one of the things to consider if you are moving is your camera focus changes if you're moving around, right?
Right.
So unless you're at like, you know, F14 or something where you're stopped down and you have a really broad depth of field, you're going to need to focus while you're moving. And a gimbal like this will actually do that for you, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Expensive, though.
Right. I mean, you know, got to pay to play.
Yeah.
Michael is just saying, guys in wheelchairs were the old way of doing the smoothish moves. Yeah, for sure. Now we've gone to hoverboards and skateboards and
the gimbals are definitely taking over, though.
Right,
and
for sure.
Especially the more inexpensive mobile ones. So putting the
GoPro-sized ones.
Yeah,
I mean, they're. I've seen some amazing, super cinematic shots come out of guys with GoPros and a $150 gimbal.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing what they've been able to do, especially with newer GoPros that can shoot 4K and everything else. If you have a good enough eye, and you have that equipment, you can do a fair bit and make it look really good.
Oh, absolutely. And I've even seen high-end commercials being shot using gimbals where people will pass the gimbal like through a car window and stuff, and it's smooth enough that you can do some pretty tricky moves.
Some of these, I've seen some gimbals that are passive in a way, that are kind of just based on balance, like a Steadicam idea, but most of them are actually powered. They have little servo motors everywhere to adjust all those.
It all started with this one. This is the Movi. So the Movi was like the first one to hit the market. It's now sort of been surpassed in popularity. Actually, they have a new one, which is apparently amazing. I don't know a lot about it. But then the Movi kind of transitioned, and the Ronin is now, I'd say, probably one of the more popular for professionals. So here's an example of, this was actually a setup that I did a while back with a Ronin. Now, even with a Ronin, you need to balance in advance. So you need to have a stand like this one, and you need to do your balancing. There's an app that you need to use to configure. Okay. So it's not as simple as just throw your camera on there and it works. There is some work, and you can't easily get on and off of a Ronin either. So if you're going to be doing different types of shots, and don't expect yourself to be able to pop on and off of a Ronin in like a minute or two. It takes some time. Now, you also need, in many cases, what this guy's using here. This is called the Ready Rig, and it adds, again, a vest and some support. Because
you're adding weight, right? You're not just talking about your 9, 10, 15, 20-pound camera. Now you're talking about another X number of pounds for that gimbal. So you got to support all that somehow. And,
yeah, these are heavy. They're not light. Now, you see here that here's like a remote. This is what someone would use to steer the camera or do the, you could be racking focus if you put rails on the bottom of this with a follow focus.
Right.
So all kinds of different ways to use these things. People also take these gimbals and attach them onto cranes and arms and all kinds of different things. So
and that's when you start getting big budget.
Yeah, so here's how I used a gimbal. This was... you see here I've got a gimbal, but I've got it on an easy rig.
Right.
So you see this is one of those, I guess, vests that dangle.
Backpack.
And it's got an arm that goes over your head.
Like a mini crane almost up over your head.
Yeah.
With a little cable that supports a lot of that weight.
Exactly. And here you see like someone using it without a gimbal. They can still be very useful, these easy rigs. And
well, that single cable attachment can take the weight, but it also means that, both, I guess, positively and negatively, you can move it.
Yeah.
You can still be shaky with it, but if you let it really sort of rest on that single, assuming it's balanced, you can kind of smooth it out without a gimbal to a degree.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, anything that gives you more points of contact between yourself and the camera and distributes the weight is going to help you get a smoother shot.
For sure, yeah. Michael was just saying, I don't know these guys, but asleep at the wheel does iPhone locked shot broadcast or shaky cam, no in between. Well, exactly, and I mean that, that's really what, for the most part, you want to try and avoid when you're talking about doing a quality broadcast. Static is great. It's just, it gets boring after a while. That's why we sometimes try to get out of the studio.
We do move around with the camera sometimes as well.
We try and go on the road. We try and do things from people's garages and stuff like that for fun. Because if every single show, every single time was this locked static shot, people wouldn't necessarily keep coming back to consume that content. It's got to be different. It's got to be interesting. At the same time, we don't want shaky cam shots. No. It just doesn't look good. It's not appealing.
No, not really. Just wanted to show this. Kind of neat. They call this the Came Kong. So this is just another rig. This guy's got
you were showing me
two
that
sort of robotic arms.
That thing looks awesome.
So this gives him an ability to hold his gimbal and get the weight off of his shoulders without having to use something that goes over the top. So maybe if you were doing lower shots, I don't know, this could be useful. So just cool how many ways there are to use gimbals. Gimbals is not going away. It's going to continue to be huge. Another type of camera support, cable cams.
Very popular sporting events, big open spaces. I guess their advantages are speed of movement in an open space. They can zip pretty quick. Obviously you have to have a place to rig the cabling. So, stadiums work well, things like that. But again, this kind of mixes a lot of those things. You're using a slider mixed with a gimbal to sort of control everything and suspend it and get that movement.
And even at the low end, here is just one with a GoPro.
Exactly.
Easy.
And I guess one of the things there is this is the the skyhook version of the old train track style, except you're not taking up any space in the ground. You can go over a crowd. You can move through a space easier because you're suspended above.
Yeah, you could go through a window, start outside a building, go into a building. Like really, your imagination is the limit here with something like this.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, well, exactly. When we're talking about the easy rig stuff, Michael, this is exactly your point. Back pain is always an issue for operators with heavy equipment. Absolutely. That's exactly why it's a good idea if you have to be mobile with your operators to look at some of that stuff so you don't kill them. It's hard work.
Oh, for sure. Like myself, I've had to do some physio, get some massages because holding the heavy cameras does take a toll on your body. This is maybe a little more practical for many scenarios as a dolly.
Right.
Obviously, you need tracks, but you can get inexpensive dollies for
tripods and stuff.
Just in your studio. If you have a studio space and you want to do some camera moves,
get one of those.
Inexpensive dolly track.
We should get one of those.
Doesn't have to be Hollywood grade.
Mr. Producer.
Now, of course, you've got the dollies like this where the operator actually sits on it. That's maybe
someone has to push
for film production type stuff. But in many cases, you can do something like this where you just have a dolly, simple dolly on a track, nothing too fancy. You also see if you have a smooth floor, you could just have a tripod with wheels on the bottom and do some trucking and do some basic moves.
See, that one scares me because you're relying on the floor being perfectly smooth.
Yep.
No one dropped a tiny pebble or anything to get jammed up. Ron was just saying here, shots on the tracks bad. I'm curious, Ron, what is that a bad experience or?
Oh, train tracks. Maybe I think one of the photos showed people doing train track scene or something.
Yeah, it could get a little.
Just watch for trains. I've heard of some mishaps with people shooting on bridges.
Yeah, Stefan was just saying, bought a harness for a dog where you can attach the action cam to the dog. Yeah, I've seen a lot of cool viral videos about that. Not exactly the most stable shots on the back of a dog,
maybe not.
But interesting. But those are some examples of where, because those are such unsteady shots because of the nature of a dog, oftentimes some of those cool videos are difficult to watch or you don't understand what you're watching because the compression can't keep up with the movement and it's just garbled nonsense until things settle down a bit. There's some good stuff in there.
And we promised we'd also show some jibs. I just wanted to quickly show some examples of jibs. Jibs are relatively inexpensive. You basically are using tripod legs and a counterweighted arm. That's really all there is to it.
So again, this is taking that Steadicam concept of counterbalanced things and just throwing it into another mix.
Yep.
Again, taking all of the weight off the operator, which is great, and they can just push it around, move it around.
And your camera can float really in many directions. You might need to figure out how you're going to tilt and pan your camera.
Right.
There are options with PTZ heads, like pan tilt heads, motorized. But even just something like this, if you want to do some cool moves, nice smooth moves, you can do it pretty much as a one-man band if you set it up right.
I've seen a lot of this in newsroom style setups where they want to do that sweep into the weather.
Can I just point out the flip-flops?
Well, of course, he's a professional.
This guy is cool because he operates his jib with flip-flops.
Yeah, exactly. Safety first. But, again, the nightly news, they want to do that sweeping shot into the anchor, right? And oftentimes they're going to use a simple jib like that because it's not overly complicated, but you don't have huge floor space necessarily, so you have a single anchor point like that, do that sweep.
Now, if you take it to the extreme, you go camera cranes, these are...
That's just scaled up.
This is just, taking it to the next level, right? Scissor crane.
Yeah. So at NAB back in April, we saw some amazing stuff like this. We saw some really, really cool things. So if you're ever interested in this stuff, NAB and similar shows that are really oriented around the broadcast professionals, you can just go there and just drool and dream all day. There's some crazy stuff, including going as far as the Russian arms.
Yes, let's take a look at some Russian arms. These are basically camera cars.
Yeah, so of course, start with the Ferrari.
Let's start with here's a Ferrari kitted out.
The literal Ferrari, not just the Ferrari of, but the literal.
These are, this is how you film an action movie.
So
right?
this is how you're combining basically everything of no weight on a person because they're driving a car, a crane, a gimbal, everything all in one piece. A jib, all these things, all as one gigantic package to form
remote-controlled camera,
the ultimate filming machine.
There's a
Lambo,
Lamborghini with some kind of.
That one's cool because it's so minimalist coming out of the front of it. That's awesome, and it works because they have the front.
This is the same type of camera that they put on like a news helicopter.
Right.
Extremely powerful camera.
Yeah.
But even something like this, here's a
little robot. That'd be awesome.
Here's a remote control rig.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is more. We're talking about like film production level stuff here, but the principles are the same. It's about getting your camera into some interesting locations and telling the story visually, having stable shots. As far as camera stabilization, rigging, the sky's the limit.
For sure.
It's really. You can take rigging as far as you want to. There's all kinds of options. I'd recommend checking out there's a couple, I don't know if you check out Instagram, but there's a couple I follow. This is filmmakers. There's some really cool, you just tend to see a lot of very cool setups that people are doing that just.
That's cool. He's just doing a big 360 around.
This is just, all custom, obviously, how they're doing this. But, you see that's how cool. Far people take this. Here's an example of, I think we saw the hoverboard guy. There's some cool examples here with, camera on a pole. This is just a gimbal on a pole.
Across a guy's shoulders.
Yeah, why not? I think this was the camera setup on a motorcycle.
Yeah, this is from the new Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah, again, just gimbals, all kinds of. This was kind of cool that.
Yeah, you showed me this earlier. This was really neat.
This is like a robotic camera on some kind of robotic arm, and they show the result in a moment here. We'll just wait for it. I think this is a Burger King commercial. Shout out to the Whopper.
Not sponsored.
But, if you want to get these kind of shots, this is...
You're right. You kind of have two options there, right? I mean, a human could try to do that, but it's just going to be kind of clunky. The robot really kind of smooths it out. Or you could just try to do a pure CGI render of that. Mm-hmm. But their burgers are already questionable, so you don't really want to have CGI'd burgers. Then they're even less appetizing than they already are. So, there's some things you got to...
motorcycle rig. I know you want one of these, George.
Yeah, we were looking at that earlier. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what sort of counterweight they put on the back of that bike to be able to support that much on the front end.
Yeah, he's going to want to do wheel, or no, I guess it's front weighted, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's nuts. That thing's crazy.
So anyway, I think we've kind of covered a lot of territory. Some of this obviously is not like practical to most people.
No,
but it's fun to look at and it's interesting, right? For most people. A good tripod, a slider, even in a live streaming studio, put your camera on a slider and get some moves, try some things.
Well, exactly. It really does add a whole new level to the production quality of what you're trying to do, whether that's live streamed or recorded or both. Anything that just makes it more appealing, steadier, cleaner, but it can also kind of throw things into the mix is a good thing. Make it fit the budget first, and see what you can do. I think some people are mentioning things like in here. Michael was saying you can use PVC pipe to create dolly tracks. There's so much DIY that you can do for a lot of these technologies if you want to really save some money, but take that next step in terms of adding some more depth and quality to your production. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much it for today. We just wanted to share some ideas and concepts and samples of different things with you. We use the Steadicam style, the slider, and the Monopods, and obviously tripods. We use those a lot.
Yep.
We use them very frequently. Tripods and monopods mostly when we're doing the live show, but certainly the slider is responsible for a lot of the great shots we have.
Product shots
in some of those, those product shots in some of the other videos, and so those can be great. Stefan's saying, do we mention drones? We didn't, because again, it's really a drone. You're taking that. You have to have a gimbal on a drone. Otherwise, it's just no way, which is fine. Many of them have that built in, and they're great. That takes a whole other type of skill, I think, to control. There's some fancier drones out there that you can just use GPS waypoints and do all that.
Can I just show this drone video very quickly?
Sure, yeah.
I just thought this was neat. I don't know if you've seen these like new electronic surfboard things, but this guy's getting towed on an electronic surfboard
with a drone.
By a drone.
Nice.
So, I mean, I can't wait until this says the year 2050, but I can't wait until, you know, the technology is moving so quickly. So,
I've seen a lot of these new boards. They're basically, you know, they're interesting.
Anything is possible if you can imagine it and you have enough money.
The main thing I think with a drone, to sum up that final thing there, is depending on where you live in different countries, there are regulations around drones. Mm-hmm. Any of these other things we've been talking about, it doesn't matter. Anybody can do it provided you can buy the equipment. But a drone, especially here in Canada, are pretty heavily restricted. And if you're going to be filming professionally with a drone, you're going to have to get a license.
You got to do a license. You need insurance as well.
There was a story this morning that in an airport in Edmonton, a commercial flight almost hit a drone that was flying illegally in the airport airspace. Right? These are things that there's a lot more risk when you introduce a drone for everything involved. There's legality that comes into the mix. Yeah. We're using a Steadicam. Who cares?
No one's going to get mad at you for doing that.
Exactly. So I think that's going to wrap it up for today. This ended up as actually a very long episode, but we had some fun. We had some good chats.
Yeah, thanks for everybody for joining us today. It's great to have you guys here with us.
People shared some great experiences there as well, so keep that going. Throw some things into the forums, chat, wherever else. Share your different experiences with different camera stabilizer things.
Yeah, Scott, let us know what slider you got. I'd like to check it out as well.
And we'll see you next week for a topic yet to be decided. We got a few things in the air. We're trying to
as always, if there's a topic you guys want us to cover, let us know.
Email live@epiphan.com, and we'll check that out and see if we can get your topic or your ideas on the show. So I'm George.
And I'm Dan.
We'll see you next week.
See you guys.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.